Puerto Rico, a land known for its picturesque scenic beauty. But what you may not know about this land is that it has been home to countless Jews for over 500 years. These are the stories of those Jews and of its people. You're watching Arroz con Devorah.
Hi everyone, with Hashem's help, you're watching another edition of Arroz con Devorah, and if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing to be alerted to the upcoming episodes. And today we're talking about genealogy, and if you are or think you are a descendant of Anusim, you're going to find today's guest very interesting. And now, while most of us have entered the rabbit hole of genealogy, today's guest has taken it one step further. Here today from Eretz Israel to talk to us about the ups and downs and everything around is not only my great friend, but like so many of my other guests, my prima, Yael. Yael, welcome to Arroz con Devorah. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well considering the circumstances.
Yes, and for those, just to give a little context, you are currently in Eretz Israel. We are in Erev Shavuot while you have missiles coming down at any moment, so Chas v'Shalom, that they should go off while we're doing this show. But I gotta tell you, you're like, I don't know, like you're gonna be like worthy of Dateline, or I mean, we're doing this now, like you're gonna be like,
dramatic, but anyway, yeah, it has.
We're always gonna put a little sazon on it, and this could be like the sazon. You never know, right? Like Chas v'Shalom, like it should be like, when this is going off,
It has, it's terrible to joke about it, but we have to, because the situation is just so intolerable that there's, and after Corona, after the Corona disaster, it's too much already. Hashem, please. I don't know how.
Not only help, it's funny, we over on this side, obviously we are with you, and let me tell you, shout out to all the IDF who are always holding it down. And, for everyone who's on the outside, really, send support messages, give shout outs to them. They're holding it down so that we have an Eretz Israel to go back to, right?
Absolutely.
Like we got to keep that in perspective that, you don't support these people, you've got nothing to go back to, Chas v'Shalom. So please consider sending messages of support, help them in whatever way you can, send them care packages. In America here, we send care packages to our military. Please consider doing the same thing to the IDF. And I just want to say, shout out to all of you guys. We love you, hold it down. We are with you. Yes. So, there's this great thing they do in Korea. We love you. We love
you. Yeah, that's cute.
And because we're Yehudi, we do double portion, so you get two. We love you. So yeah, so I gotta tell you, it's so funny. I find, I'm still holding out hope that Ashley Perry and myself will be related, because it seems like everyone I've interviewed, we've somehow been related, and we all have this tie back to Puerto Rico. And it's funny because we were finding this through genealogy, which is what we're going to talk about today, what it is, what it isn't, the ups, the downs. Many of us, we have these jokes who have gone into genealogy. Many of us have done it for many years. We've had many late nights. I often joke that I start out, it's like 6 in the morning and I'm all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and the house is going crazy and there's a balagan and you're like lost, like you're just disconnected. And all of a sudden it gets quiet and you realize it's like 2, 3 in the morning. And many of us have these nights, right? Like, sometimes it's not just a night. Sometimes it's like a week, and it's like
spurts. Like you have to go at it, and then you have to come out of it, and then you have to go back into it. And
there's lines you chase and you're successful, and sometimes you hit a dead end, and a lot of times it's that line that you want. And I think for many Anusim, they tend to stay fixated on the mother to the mother to the mother, because of course this is what they feel is going to prove their you know, their lineage and their heritage and their claim. Now, you know, it's funny that the Rabbanim have always said, at least to me, listen, if you feel the call to come back to Klal Yisrael, come back and figure it out later, right? Exactly. But what has been your experience? Tell us a little bit about genealogy. And I want people to know too, like, I'm so excited for people to hear because, you know, I think that my late nights have qualified me to be like, I'm not a genealogist by any stretch of the imagination, but to kind of know what I'm talking about. But you take it to a whole other level. Like, and I got to tell you that if you're from Puerto Rico, I would imagine, my hope is that one day, either you're going to have the zehut to work with Yael, or that your children, your grandchildren are going to be in a museum in Eretz Israel that has her work with Puerto Rican genealogy, because I've never met anyone who has gone to the extent that you have gone to for information that is not necessarily about your own family. So that is like that's a next level, because you have information that can really help a lot of people in Puerto Rico. And I think you know, it's funny. Do you remember when the CDC first came out about Corona and they said, assume you have it, right? Like so I feel like if you're from Puerto Rico, assume you have some kind of like connection to this ancestry. So
absolutely, especially if your genealogy, it goes back to the early days of the settlement of Puerto Rico. You know, I mean, if your ancestors came to Puerto Rico in the early 1900s or something, maybe you don't have Sephardic ancestry. But if you came from early Puerto Rican ancestry, you 90% likely have, you know, an Anusim in your ancestry somewhere.
So now let's tell me, because most people don't wake up and say, I'm going to track down Puerto Rican genealogy. So what happened? How did you get there? I mean, this is just so fascinating. I mean, tell us a little about it.
It's a very good place to start. So I was raised in a upper middle class, not upper middle class family in upstate New York, central New York, basically. And we basically were the most secular family that you could be. I mean, there was no discussion about religion. It was not a part of our, you know, family experience. We basically, my parents sort of had this attitude that like religion was something that people did way back in the day. It was very old fashioned. We don't do that anymore. It was very agnostic, which was fine. You know, actually, I think that benefited me in the long run,
right.
Because I didn't have any preconceived notions about religion at all.
Right.
And my parents did always say that they wanted us to be able to choose our path and choose what we believed in and not impose something on us.
Right.
Now, it's kind of a double-sided coin, because part of that is just absolving themselves of any responsibility about teaching me anything about spirituality, because
it might be absolving themselves for teaching you all the shtuyot that we have to like now, you know.
Yeah, deprogram yourself from. But either way, that was my background and my experience. I went through life. I got a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry. I went on to veterinary school and graduated cum laude from Kansas State University. And I really, really enjoyed being a veterinarian.
Right.
I told my parents when I was 5, when I had the little Fisher-Price veterinary hospital, like in the truck, that I was going to be a veterinarian.
Good for you that you stuck with your dreams. Like mine was astronaut, lawyer, medical doctor, like you name it, I probably did it. And ask me how many I accomplished. So kudos to you that you got it, right? Like
I went through the process, and I graduated, and I opened my own veterinary hospital eventually. 4 years after I got out of veterinary school, I opened a cat hospital. By the way, this is Hermes. He's been sitting up.
He's so cute. He is so cute. Rescue?
He's a rescue. I rescued him last year here in Israel. He came from France originally. He's 8 years old, and he's
bonjour, Hermes.
It's such a blessing to us, really. But he doesn't want to be separated from me right now.
Especially
I thought he would
with
sleep on the bed. Yeah, the alarms keep going off, and it's very scary for him. So he's got a lot of anxiety.
Well, welcome, Edmez. We always like a good Edmez on the show, right?
So anyway, I became a veterinarian and I really enjoyed it. And I ended up getting married and leaving my veterinary practice and going to New York City. I went through 4 in vitro attempts to get pregnant with my first child. I was 36, I think. And I finally did get pregnant, Baruch Hashem, and I had an amazing son who is 16 now. When he was very young, I separated from his father. We were going through a divorce and it was a very tumultuous time for me. It was very, very difficult for me, the divorce. At the same time, I had this child who I was watching develop, and there was a part of me that knew that there was something more to the world and to life that I just wasn't connected to because I didn't have a sense of spirituality.
Right.
As I saw him developing, there was just something in me that said, there's no way that there cannot be a creator in this world when I'm watching this miracle of life develop before me. That took a lot of effort to bring into this world, you know, as it was. Anyway, the divorce had been very traumatic for me, and I went through a very difficult time, and I was searching and searching. And because of my personality and the way I am, I have to start at the beginning of anything I want to know about. I've got to go all the way back to the very beginning and follow, even if it's just 20 minutes of reading to get myself so that I understand the progression of how something got from here to here.
Right.
So I started reading books about religion, just religion. How did religion develop? When was the first religion, etc. And I had this big coffee table book, World Religions, and I was reading through it from the beginning, trying to make sense of everything.
Right.
And it just kept coming back to Judaism. It was the only thing that made sense.
It's like the Kuzari. It's like, you know, it's like they go through all of it, and the only thing that made sense to the king was the Jewish, you know, ideology.
It just, nothing else clicked with me, and Judaism it just kept coming back and kept coming back. I read the book, I think it's Dennis Prager and Joseph Telushkin, The 9 Questions That People Ask About Judaism. Very profound for me. And then I started to read Choosing to Be Jewish by Rabbi Mark Angel. From Shearith. At the time he was at Shearith Israel, the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in Manhattan, which happened to be 10 blocks directly up from me. I lived on Columbus Circle. I could look up Central Park West and see the synagogue from there. And I opened his book and I got down, I think it was at the bottom of the first page of that book, where he said that there's a phenomenon of people who are returning, who have Spanish and Portuguese ancestry, who are returning to Judaism. Something clicked inside me. I had visions. It lasted less than a second. It was just like in a movie when they're trying to show you the progression of the character, like how they got to the point they are, and they fast forward all these images at you like really fast. It was like that, but I didn't see it in my eyes. I saw it inside me. It was
in your mind's eye.
My soul saw it. I didn't physically see these things, but it all came at me so fast, and it was so profound that it changed the trajectory of my life permanently until now. And I can't explain it in any other way. And I certainly, with my scientific background, can understand how many people could just not conceptualize what that would be like, or that would even be possible. But I experienced it, and I can't unexperience what happened to me. I was so profoundly moved. I fell on the floor, started sobbing immediately, thanking God that he saved me from my wandering in the desert. I was 38 years old at the time, but you know, it felt prophetic that, you know, it was almost like 40 years. I actually converted when I was 40 years old. And I said to my rabbi, I need to convert this year because I'm 40. And
well, you know, Jews, it takes us like 40 years to get somewhere, you know.
Anyway, I called the rabbi the next day. It's a very funny story. Rabbi Chaim Angel, he's Mark Angel's son, and
Right.
I was on hold for a long time with him, and I was very nervous. He put me on hold. He gets back on the phone and he says to me, "Okay, what's your story?" Just like that.
That was exactly what my Rob said to me. Okay, what's your story? And I think they're never fully prepared for what comes out. Like they're like, oh, okay, mamash, like.
I verbally vomited like everything that happened to me in the previous 24 hours. I was out of breath and I stopped and he says, "That's a pretty good story."
I know, I get it. I don't know why we do it. It's like we have all this pent up, right? And then that's it. Those are the, like, if you're a Rob and you're watching this, be careful when you say, what's your story? You got to be prepared for what comes out because you just never know, you know? So, I mean, what puts you on this path? Because you have actually traveled, I mean, a lot of places to collect information that is just astounding because as many people from Puerto Rico know, a lot of this information is not readily available anymore. And it seems like many, you know, I think many people were shocked. I remember when you and I spoke about even the Puerto Rican Inquisition and how shocking it was. It was one of the most severe, I think, ever. And there's very little known about it. And so I think it's very shocking because I remember asking, now my uncle's wife, like, ellos son puertorriqueños, right? Like, you know, like, And so, I mean, they're probably handing out Puerto Rican cards to people like, yeah, like you're Puerto Rican, not so much. You gotta have more sazon on you.
No sazon for you.
Exactly. You don't even get adobo like you messed up there, you know? And so, you know, they were even shocked to hear about that there was an Inquisition. And mind you, a lot of them are Catholic. So, of course, I even mentioned the infamous Manso. They had no clue who he was. Can you imagine? And then, you know, to find out that he's in, you know, unfortunately in my genealogy, which was like shocking. But this is like something that a lot of people don't know. So what got you there? And then what got you to the point that you said like, oh my gosh, there's something big here? Because I've always said that Puerto Rico has a lot of nuggets of treasury, hidden of information. And I feel like there's a lot of missing pieces of the Inquisition and what happened. And I feel like it could be found in these records. So tell me a little bit about that, because it's so interesting.
So, you know, I called the rabbi the next day and I started studying for conversion. But in the back of my mind, I had always thought, I had met somebody several months previous to me having this spiritual awakening. And he was a Jew, and he did mention to me like, oh, do you know that there are, you know, Spanish and Portuguese people who, you know, were Jews 500 years ago and they converted. And you know, he was explaining to me the Inquisition, and I really had not a clue at all about it.
You and I both. I'm so glad I'm not alone.
And I had this spiritual awakening. It wasn't 100% clear to me that it had to do with the Inquisition, but it was pretty clear to me. There was fire. I got this message from Hashem that my ancestors had gone missing. They'd gone off track, and that it was my job to return their honor back to the Jewish people. It was, as I say to some people, it was like you knew nothing about calculus, and all of a sudden in a split second, you suddenly understood everything about calculus.
It's like the Matrix, they just downloaded a program into you.
Exactly, that's exactly what it felt like to me. I suddenly understood my family's history, at least the basic premise of it. So I started to search, and I started to ask my mother questions. I said to her, I had this very profound experience, and you know, I'm not sure what to do. And I contacted a rabbi, and she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know. But she had a sister, Miriam, who had a son, and he is probably about 10 years or so older than me, 15 years older than me, maybe. And I sent him an email. I'd never met him in person before, but I sent him an email, and I said, you know, this is what happened to me. I had this experience, and I don't know, you know, what sense to make of it, but I'm starting to research our ancestry. Do you have any information to help me? And he wrote me right back and he said to me, it's very interesting because 2 weeks ago, I was in a synagogue for a coworker's son's bar mitzvah. And he's Catholic, mind you. So he's in the synagogue for this coworker's son's bar mitzvah, and he suddenly got this really warm feeling. And he had flashbacks and remembered Grandpa Maldonado, our grandfather, saying to him, "You're Jewish." And he used to say, "No, Grandpa, I'm Catholic. What are you talking about?" And he would say, "No, you're Jewish."
Right.
And when he was in that synagogue 2 weeks before I sent him the email, he suddenly felt like, he said to me, maybe Grandpa Maldonado was trying to tell me something. And I wrote him back and I said, "I'm here to tell you." He was screaming. He had something to tell you for sure. So that really opened the door for me.
Cryptically. I mean, I think sometimes like we're hearing this from our relatives, and I think that we're still like, it's like a shock, even though all the possibility exists. And yet when we're hearing it, it's shocking. It's just like,
yeah, I think it's probably more shocking for people who come from a very strong Christian or Catholic background. For me, it wasn't, I mean, it was a little bit shocking because I had been separated from any concept of spirituality for so long that it was like so esoteric and metaphysical to me that I just, like, whoa,
and P.S., by the way, I keep coming back to the Jewish way of thinking. So,
but at the same time, this awakening that I had was so profound that I mean, I know some people, the transition is a little more slow, like there's little pieces that click with them and until things start to build up. And then but for me, it was like, really from like 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It was like I had this spiritual awakening and there was no going back after that. So when I heard this from my cousin, it was just verification that, I felt very validated. I sent it to my rabbi immediately and I was just so excited about it. But from that point, I really made a decision very early on. I was 38 years old. I had one child. I wanted more children, and I believed in my heart that I had a Jewish neshama and that I needed to be considered Jewish according to the Jewish people. No questions asked. I was not, it didn't take me long to sort of figure out the situation of the Bnei Anusim, and I just said, I need to be legitimately Jewish as quickly as possible. I need to go into conversion program and put everything into this. I need to have a child, at least one who's Jewish, that I can pass on, my legacy. This is important to me. I'm young enough that I can do this, but it was very hard the first time. And I went forward very aggressively, learning as much as I could about Judaism and converting in an Orthodox way. I decided also very early on that Orthodoxy was really the only option for me. It was really, it just did not jive with me to do things in any other way than that. And I knew that I wanted to be Israeli. I wanted to, move home to Israel and return to my home. And it was very, very important to me. And I needed it to be as legitimate as possible. So
now, I mean, this brings me to a very, very important topic that keeps coming up for me. I know it's come up for a lot of people. I think I know I say it. I've heard a lot of people, including my guests, who have said that they did the same thing. They went full forward with the conversion, even knowing that they had this Jewish neshama and all these, and there's a lot of technicalities and politics when it comes to labeling and Anusim. But I think that a lot of us who have been successful in coming back, we've all kind of said the same thing. We went full forward in Judaism, and Hashem kind of opened up the doors to all of this information after the fact. And I think what we've been finding through the genealogy has been eye-opening. And I can only attest to my own situation. For me, Columbus is just the tip of it. he was just the tip of it for me. I mean, you kind of been through my tree. You hang out in the tree house with me once in a while. So I mean, there's a lot of key players in this whole Inquisition that will be found in my own lineage, and they're not always the heroes. Some of them are the Reshaim, and they are the Reshaim of the Reshaim. And I think that is something that perhaps is an elephant in the room for many of us who have this kind of ancestry. And I think a lot of us, when we tell our stories, we're so willing to tell all the great people we found in our tree, and we kind of want to tuck away those bad people. But I think that for me, kind of highlighting those people helps to begin the dialogue about what really happened. And I think that that's part of helping everyone in Puerto Rico and a lot of the people who are surrounding these, Cuba, Santo Domingo, Jamaica, Brazil, South America, because, a lot of my family were some of those first people coming into Puerto Rico. And so who they brought with them, what was going on, these are things that I think help to answer some of those questions. And I think, again, finding Manso was like, and I remember, I think you were the first one that ever brought his name to my attention. And I just remember like, oh my gosh, this is horrible, this guy, like, let's roast him, and he's my tío, and it was shocking. And I'm like, and to think that not only was my tío, but out of that same lineage, there were members of his family who were roasted by the Inquisition. And so it very quickly for me became very apparent that this is much more complicated than what we think. But part of that is going through the documents to figure out who was married to who came in when. And so, but like I said earlier, this information it's not just readily known. And in fact, I personally believe that some of the work that you have done in traveling and collecting this information is really going to be instrumental in helping put together these pieces. It's almost like you're on a CSI mission and you have all these pieces. And so far, like, some of them are starting to connect, some of them are great, and we're holding them here. Tell me about your journey, because I think you've been to the Canary Islands, you've been to Spain, you've been to Puerto Rico, and you've kind of photographed. Of course, I've already volunteered to come to Eretz Israel and help you like put your library together because it's so fascinating. As soon as I can, Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to be there. But tell me about this journey, and tell me a little bit too. I think a lot of people get caught up in this genealogy to prove the mother of the mother of the mother, right? And I got to tell you, a lot of these tidbits did not come from my mother of my mother of my mother. They came from my mother's grandfather's father, exactly. And so even though they were, this grandparent way up when was a direct connection, it wasn't the mother of the mother of the mother. But if I had stood focused just on that, I would have missed a lot of this information. So talk to us a little bit about, what genealogy is, the realistic, takeaway that you should be, looking to get out of genealogy. I think you ask an important question of a lot of people you work with is what are you trying to get out of this? What is this? And so talk to us a little bit about that, because I think it's important for people to know. And then Bezrat Hashem, I want to get into like how people can start the search for themselves and when they should be pulling in a genealogist, because it is very costly and for a good reason. I mean, they're like, they are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of records just to find that one record to go to the next generation. That's it. So tell us a little bit about that.
So when I started to, as I said, I chose the convert now and do research later. So I concentrated on conversion, and I was dabbling a little bit in the genealogy during that time. As soon as I converted, not long after that, I came to Israel, and I got married and I got pregnant, Baruch Hashem, and I had an amazing son. So I have two boys, and as he was an infant and I was at home in Israel, I had more time and I really started to delve into the research, and I contacted Gloria Mound, who was involved with Casa Shalom. She was instrumental really in starting this movement here in Israel. She amassed an amazing library of materials, starting from when she was in Ibiza, I think, and the Balearic Islands there. She was a British woman, Jewish, was there on vacation, happened to come across some, artifact and start questions about it, and nobody had really ever studied it there, and it just really opened her eyes, and she really delved into it, and she did a lot of amazing work. And I met her, and she was the first person really that listened to my story and was just so like, I know what you're talking about, and every family name that I possibly gave her, yes, I can give you. She would just find the source like in no time in her library. Oh, I know where that is, So she was amazing, and I started working with her. She ended up moving to Netanya Academic College, her entire collection, and they started the Institute of Sephardi and Anusim, the International Institute of Sephardi and Anusim Studies. And I worked with her to start a genealogical research department there. A lot of it came about when Spain offered citizenship to people with Sephardic ancestry, so we were helping those people. And I was in the meantime, really working on my own genealogy very, very heavily. I spent uncounted hours like at the computer, all hours of the night, just literally rebuilding all of the genealogical information into one big tree that I could find from Puerto Rico. What started out was that I looked at the area that I could trace my maternal line to. And the reason a lot of us start with that is because of the discrimination.
To the mother.
Well, just because it's the only way that we can validate ourselves as Jews, to say that like there's a reason that we're here, even though it doesn't have to be that maternal line that is the reason that we're there searching, or coming back and doing a full conversion or whatever. So I think a lot of people, for some reason, don't want to do the conversion. They just want to go this route and
find a smoking gun.
And it just is so rare that that can actually happen, because you're talking about usually a minimum of at least 15 generations.
And I think Hashem is setting it up that way for a reason. My personal belief, and this is just my personal belief, is that I feel that part of the tikkun, which is why we're all back here, we're all here to do a thing, is the choice. It's the decision to come. I mean, that's just my personal chidush. People can take that for what it is. But I feel that that's the reason why that a lot of us who have, like you said, gone full force with the conversion, all of a sudden get this opening of information that we had been trying years to find. But continue on.
So I got back a few generations on my direct maternal line, and I was very stuck. And this particular, it's my great-great-grandmother. She had on the 1910 census, the 1920 census, and the 1930 census, she had given a different maternal surname each time. And one of them that she gave was Marrero. And I had started to look into the Marrero family, and there was certainly a lot of information connecting them to Conversos. They were listed on, almost any list of surnames, and you could certainly find a lot of Marrero families that were considered to have been Jews at some time in history, and they came from Portugal, and the name originally was spelled M-O-R-E-I-R-A, Morera. So I just became very interested in that family, even though I had no definitive ties. I couldn't find this great grandmother, so I didn't know who her parents were exactly, but it was the only information I had. And it happens to be that a Morero that came from the Canary Islands was one of the original group of settlers to the Toa Baja, Toa Alta area. In 1695, they were the first group of families that came to that area with Juan Fernandez Franco de Medina, who was the appointed governor at that time, and they came with him. So I went to the Canary Islands to find these people, this group of people, and to gather as many documents and further that tree as far as I could to see who were these people that came, you know, even though I didn't know for sure that they were my ancestors. I had an amazing time in the Canary Islands. It was incredible. When we were in the archive, it was magical. We couldn't have phones in there. I couldn't photograph anything. I brought my very close friend, Adina, with me. It was amazing. We literally found document after document generation. You know, we were there for like 3 hours and we were able to like further things very rapidly. And it was so exciting. Then I went and bought all of these books in the Canary Islands, and I came home and I got on their, like, all of their genealogical blogs and websites, their archives. They have such incredible historians and genealogists there in the Canary Islands. And I started to gather all of their information and I started entering it into my MAC family tree, which was the program that I use. I just was gathering thousands and thousands of people's information in there, you know, and it was, I always have to qualify this, that I'm not putting in, if I have the documents and I have the dates, I'm putting them in. But if I don't have documents and dates, I'm still putting the names in based on information in a academic article that I read that said these are the families and it showed the trees and whatever. I entered it all into my computer. After several years traveling, going to Puerto Rico, going to the Canary Islands, gathering all of this information and putting it into this huge database, I started to make connections in places that I just never imagined that I would. And I started to see things in this three-dimensional way in my brain. Like, and I remembered, oh, wait, that family, he married into that one. And I just started to make a lot of these connections. I found a document of a marriage in Puerto Rico in 1685 of Jacomi Farrow. And I remembered, as I was going through these Puerto Rican documents and transcribing everything and putting it into my computer program, I saw this Jacomi Farrow and I thought, I've read that name before.
Right.
I think it was in the Canary Islands. So I immediately pulled out my book, The Jews of the Canary Islands by Lucienne Wolfe, and I looked in the index and I found Jacomi Farrow. And that was like the first click that I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Right. I determined that it was the same person, and in addition found Manuel Lopez Pereira, who was in the Canary Islands, who was known to be a Jew and was also in Ireland. They had a business in Dublin as well, and they had a ship called the Prophet Daniel. There's a book that was published in 1975 by Angel Lopez Cantos, Historia de Puerto Rico, and Jacomi Farrow, Manuel Lopez Pereira, the ship, the Prophet Daniel, they're all listed in there in the contraband section. So clearly these were people who—
The contraband section.
Yeah, I mean, they were merchants and they were certainly dealing with contraband. That was a very big thing in that, at that time in history in Puerto Rico.
You're not kidding at all, because, you know, I grew up and I used to ask my mom, right? Because they came from a pretty well-off family, and I say, how, like, you know, how do we, you know, how do we get this, right? Where's my pony too? And she said, we used to come from merchants, which now I know is like a code, right? Like, it's like a code, right? She's like, we used to come from merchants. Right, exactly. Like, and so now, you know, so, which of course, every time I go to Puerto Rico now, my mind is going to be to bring the metal detector to see where all the merch is hidden, right? Like, but you're absolutely right. I think this code word for merchants, there's so much more behind that, because it wasn't just like goods that they were smuggling into the island. It was a lot of these Anusim that were coming in from Spain and Portugal and the Canary Islands that were coming into Puerto Rico, and they were, you know, going up into these mountainous regions, or they were going off to the Dutch colonies, or, I mean, there was like this whole trade route.
Yeah, I can find the same cluster of people.
Right.
Manuel Lopez Pereira, his family, all of their business, partners and everything. The Prophet Daniel mentioned in Puerto Rican history books,
Right.
in the Jews of the Canary Islands, in the Jews of Ireland,
Right.
in the Jews of London, in the Jews of Amsterdam. In every one of those books, I can show you those same exact people.
Right.
And that to me was just so incredible, that it was so exciting to me, and that it has driven me for since then to find connections based on this big picture that I've created by putting all of these names into this
Right.
database. Got over 52,000 names now. At the Institute, and I was helping other people with their genealogies, it was not uncommon for me to, as long as they had already done some initial work and got me a few generations back, to link them up with many of these families.
And that's what I think is important, because it's even happening for myself, where I don't know why, but it's like lately I've been running into like people of a particular regional background, and as soon as they say the last name, the same thing is starting to happen to me. It's like, oh, your family is going to connect here and here and here. And you know what I think that I find, I don't know if you get this a lot, but what I get a lot is a lot of Puerto Ricanos are very shocked that there's all these other countries involved, with maybe 6 or 7 generations back. It's not as far back as they think, that they could have had some ancestors that were in the Canary Islands, that were in these colonies, who were in Ireland. And I think that some of it, ancestry DNA is kind of help validate those claims. But it's funny because, I don't know if you recall the interview I did with another cousin that we found, Mordechai, who always knew he was Ashkenazi, knew that he had lines that trace back to Spain. And he makes a very interesting point, is that, the DNA for the Sephardim is not there yet. So what you see today is not what you'll see tomorrow, but it's not something that, that you should be saying, hey, this proves like I'm a Jew. What proves that is the documents. And I think some people, it's funny, like you have these DNA tests, right? And some of them, not just Ancestry, there's, I think, family tree DNA, and I think it'll tell you if you're a percentage of Mizrahi, and that's because they have enough people to test those markers, right? But again, it's like using DNA, it gives you something, but it's not something to give you the shooting gun. It is going to be found in these documents, but at the same time, you could be up against a roadblock on that mother to the mother to the mother to the mother. And so if you feel this call to come back, I think and this is what the Rabbanim keeps saying, it's not that we don't believe your claim, come back. I mean, and Mashiach could be here any day, come back. So
right, yeah, I remember being just absolutely panicked about dying before my conversion was completed.
Oh, yes.
That to me was like the worst thing that could possibly happen.
And you failed. It was like you failed mission, right? Like you came for all of this, and it was
out of the street and get hit by a bus, and I didn't finish this.
Now you got to come back again, So
but that brings up the point that I think we've spoken about before, the Gilgulei Neshamot,
yes.
the Kabbalistic explanation for reincarnation, basically. Yes.
And I'm glad that you bring that up, because I know that you've said that you've spoken even with your Rav, and you've asked this question about where does the neshama come from, because it doesn't necessarily come from the mother to the mother to the mother to the mother. And I think that if sometimes if somebody gets focused on that, they lose these nuggets, like we've spoken about, me deviating and finding Manso. Okay, he was a bad apple, I mean, to say the least. But there were other great people who were not on the mother of the mother, who died in the Inquisition. They have documents to say that, I mean, great tzaddikim, and they weren't the mother to the mother to the mother. But if I had only stood focused on that, I would have never found them, And I think what's so beautiful, what's so special about you, me, and even another guest that I've had, and I hope to have on again, which is our other prima, I keep calling her Hadassah Chava because that's her Hebrew name, but Denise, is that you introduced to me a line of family members that I didn't even know exist, and that was the Algarin family, which is the connection that Denise and I also have as well. We have this Algarin family. So, I mean, for me, you're not only special to me because we just have a special connection, but you're special to me, and I think to all of my personal ancestors because you brought their names back to me. Talk to me about that whole neshama thing and these names and the changes and, you know, and searching out, venturing out, looking for all of your family, not just this mother to the mother to the mother.
Right. So like I wrote this piece, which I think you have, and I don't know if you'll be able to share it with the viewers or if there's any, it was published in the Casa Shalom journal that Gloria Mound, you know, was publishing when she was alive. And I just was inspired because it was this constant churning in my mind of the names all the time, like just over and over again. And I just felt this connection to them. And each new name that I added felt like a new neshama that I was recognizing, that I was saying, I know, I see you, I see you.
You know? I see you here, I got you.
And it became a very spiritual pursuit to recover these names of these people who, you know, changed their names a lot. And maybe the name isn't even representative necessarily of their neshama because they went by so many different names. But it's the only tangible thing that I have to put down in front of me, you know, to represent all of the souls that contributed to me being here.
Right.
And I know that, you know, if you go, do you have the image? Can you put up the image of the, is it ancestral mathematics?
Yes, I will. I'll put it up right now. So,
so yeah, with this ancestral mathematics image, I thought it was very profound, you know, that you can see each generation and how quickly it multiplies, you know, the number of people at that level that have contributed to your ancestry. And you get only 9 generations back and you're at 2,048 ancestors.
Right.
10 generations back, this number is
screen. I'm sharing this screen and it says 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 grandparents. And you know, it's funny because the Torah likens us to a tree, right? And this is exactly what it is. I mean, you look at it. And so it's fascinating because, you know, this is why I've really, since going through my own, don't be afraid of the good, bad, or indifferent. There's so many people that contribute to where you are.
Right, it's like a funnel. So if you're only looking at the mothers, like one little line here, and if you're looking at the fathers, which some people do, that's only one line there. Then there's this whole filling of people that you're ignoring. It's like, you know, you're ignoring the cheese and the sauce and the everything else on the pizza.
Speaking of cheese and sauce, because, you know, that's exactly it. One of my longest cheese and sauce sticks that I found, I was following a cheese and sauce stick, right? Because I was in the mood for a little Italian, literally, right? And I was tracing this line and it happens to have this big Levi line, right? But in the beginning, it's, you know, because my father always says they changed the name. And ironically enough, like his lines, like, you know, like we're saying here's lines, they went through it. I mean, per capita, they, I think, have the most documented Anusim in his ancestry. And it's so funny that you're talking about the neshama, because if you met my father, you would feel that. There was something about his neshama that was so broken. And yet he always said, find my family, because back then there was no ancestry. I mean, I don't even think AOL was up and going yet. You know what I mean? So at the time when he was saying it, it almost seemed as an impossible thing, because you're like, all I knew is that he was given, and as you know, his father, we didn't know if it was his father. We didn't know if it was a family member that had taken him. There were some other family members that finally came forward and said, yes, it was a father. And so we were able to trace that line. And in that line, I was shocked because I remember, now here's here's the funny thing. We opened up about this, about how sometimes you're 2, 3 in the morning and the house has gone quiet and you don't know why, like because you spent the whole day on the computer and looking through. Exactly. And so it was one day I was tracing this line and I said, I'm just going to put this last entry in. You know how it is, just this last one, right? And I put this last one, I put her name on there and it says out of the Fae. And I totally went to bed. Right, there you go. I went to bed. 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if it hit me. Exactly. So I ran back to the computer like, did I dream that? Did I dream out to the Fae? Did it, was it a different, I don't know, a different last name? I go back and sure enough, it's all to the Fae. So I start trying to research that person, particularly in that name, and it hit me on a line that traced immediately to Moshe Levi Maduro, which that line goes up to Samuel Halevi Abulafia, the same one that did the synagogue in Toledo. And that line goes all the way up to Colonimos. Now, Colonimos was responsible for bringing Judaism into Germany and all these places, and really is like the founder of Hasidus. Now, I always thought I had like Hasidic tendencies, right? And this could be where it's coming from. And they were actually in Lucca, Italy. I believe he is like my 46th great grandfather. So, I mean, but if I had not gone through cheese and sauce and just went through meat and potatoes, I would have never found this line. And then there are some people like, who did great things in Puerto Rico, but they were in the cheese and sauce line. They were not in this meat and potatoes line. So I think that you are spot on when you say you have to really look through everyone. And I think I feel the same way in you at this point. I feel like it's not just about me anymore. Finding these people helps to connect all these other people. And it starts to build the story of what happened to some of these Anusim who fled, which I think is a story that's very much missing in Jewish history.
So many stories. That's the thing, is we all have so many stories. And my question in my mind is always like, what does Hashem want from me? Where does he want me to go? What is the most important story that I need to tell the world? What am I supposed to figure out? What mystery am I supposed to solve?
Right.
There's just so many of them. When I was working with people at the Institute, I would start their tree and I would look back, as many generations as we could get cleanly. And I would just look at all of those names and kind of get a feel for like what looked like it might be a promising line to go down. Right. It had nothing to do with whether it was either the direct paternal line or the direct maternal line, unless that was their goal. I always ask people at the beginning, what is it you want to do?
Which I think is an important question.
If it's, I want to prove that I was born Jewish and I don't want to have to convert and, etc. Okay, then you have to follow your direct maternal line and don't give up until, and that's it.
Yeah, how many roadblocks you hit, because you will find some roadblocks.
Of course, and good luck, because it's very, very difficult.
And I think that some people, there's
especially if you're coming from Puerto Rico, it's very difficult.
And that's what I'm saying, that I think, a lot of people, Jeannie Milgram has a very famous story of doing this, and a lot of people want to go and do that, and that's not going to be the case for everyone. I think even to an extent, my story is not a case that will be the case for everyone. So people need to have a realistic goal and anticipation and to kind of branch out. But where would you, if you were to give some tips and pointers, and just know, I am like inserting my prima relationship with you to say, I think we're going to have you back. Like, there's no question we're going to have you back, because there's just so much here. You know what I'm saying? There's so much to go. You just can't get everything in this, one show. So please know, I will, who knows, if I have to go to Eretz Israel to collect this recording, I might have to, but we have to have you back. But in the interim of that, if somebody were to start out, they're hearing this program, they want to start, where do I start? Do I have to have, 10 generations before? Where do they start? What are some like websites that they can go to? And at what point should they be saying, now I'm going to need some help?
So I always recommend starting on Ancestry. It's by far the best, initial starting point, the best place to start cataloging your family tree. It just is a very easy interface to use, and it just has so many benefits to it that, I definitely think that that's the place for beginners at the very least. I only recommend reaching out to a genealogist when you have a job that you feel like you can't do yourself. In other words, you get to a point, you can get very far back on Ancestry alone.
Right.
It really,
that's true. And the good thing about Ancestry is that, especially if you've taken the DNA test, you will connect with other members who've probably done the legwork too.
But the biggest thing is verify the information.
Of course, absolutely. I think this is key. This is key that you're saying this, because sometimes people just get like a little leaf pop up.
Oh yeah, they're like just dum 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 dum, and you just want to connect it all and just be done with it. Larry, I got 50 generations, but it's not true. So that doesn't help anybody. Really, it doesn't. So verify all of the information. You need to follow the genealogical proof standard. I sent an image to you. I don't know if you'll be able to put it up. It's a very complicated kind of flowchart image, but it helps people to understand what documents you need to prove a relationship between two people. You can't just have a Francisco Gonzalez and a Maria Rivera and see another Francisco Gonzalez and Maria Rivera and say that those are the same people. You have to have documentation that definitively shows that it's the same couple, because there's so many.
And sometimes I think even and again, I'll use my own tree just for the purpose of this interview, but you and I have gone through, and I'll say his first name, Eloy. Eloy gave us information that was not a direct, but he gave us information through his documents to confirm, a mother to a mother to a mother. So, I mean, sometimes it is exactly like you said, you have to go into the cheese and sauce dip in order to get the information that you need. And so finding those siblings is a good, start. Finding like...
If I get stuck at a brick wall, what I'm going to do is go around it in any way possible. So I'm going to try to trace everybody surrounding that family. I think, I'm a self-taught genealogist, but I think the term that they use is family reconstruction. You reconstruct the genealogy of the whole surrounding family just to get the information that you need. Maybe one piece of
and that's exactly what happened with Theo Eloy, that he gave us that information that was recorded in his documents that his sisters did not have, even though they were brother and sister. So, I mean, I think it's important that there are all these other ways, but if you're one-track minded to this one route, you're going to hit that brick wall and you're not going to be able to take it down. And I think, again, like you said, especially in Puerto Rico, the good news is that there is a lot of information for people in Puerto Rico. There's a lot of documents available where it may be harder for some other countries to get to. And I think, what has been your experience about other people in other parts of the Caribe who have been looking as well? Because maybe their documents are not as online. Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so there's a lot more information and exchange there.
I think it's more difficult in Cuba and Santo Domingo, by far more difficult to access documents there. We do, however, see a lot of connection between those families in those three islands in particular.
I know I have connections in Santo Domingo, in Cuba. I've seen some documents. I've definitely seen that for sure. And some, very few, but some even like in Brazil. So, I mean, and it always goes back to this migration route that they had. So, I mean,
I have a line from Venezuela, that I recently confirmed.
Wow. I mean, they're coming from all over. So, I mean, if you're from Puerto Rico, and well, first of all, if you're from Puerto Rico, you have to get to know my prima Yael. Like, it's just, I don't know.
Like, you're from Puerto Rico.
You can do it without her. Like, you're gonna get stuck, and you're gonna say, mira, llama tu prima Yael. You're gonna, tell her she's gonna have to help me. There's for sure, yeah, we're gonna have to have you back. I mean, there's just so much to take in.
I'm happy to come back. There's nothing I love more than helping people from Puerto Rico, who, especially people who've either done very little genealogy or just starting.
You know, I have somebody in mind. I have somebody in mind who I think I'm going to talk to him. You may find him very fascinating. He's not converted. He's not converted. He has also questioned a lot of Christianity. He's gone through a lot of spiritual experiences, and now he's starting to suspect, which, believe it or not, his father's side, I'm just going to say the last name, they have a Ortiz side, which was also a founding family of Puerto Rico. But he has also questioned a lot of, could he have a Jewish, and so technically he's really like new to all of this, really new to, and I'm going to talk to him and see. I would love to see if he would be willing to let us go into his, build a little family tree on him to see where it leads. But, I think what's important, I mean, again, it's all fascinating, but if you have this background, right? And listen, especially if you've come from a Christian background, like we've all been taught this, like the same thing. It's very hard sometimes, I think, to break out of that ideology. I would tell you, have an open mind. A lot of this information could be shocking. Everyone goes through stages. Sometimes you hear the information and your reaction today will not be the way you feel in a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 10 years. So, even if you're not looking to convert today, just have an open mind about the fact that these things really did happen. Jews really did come to Puerto Rico, even though it sounds like such a foreign concept. Because I remember when I heard like Spanish-speaking Jews, I was like, "Eso un invento, like what is that?" Like I never heard of such a thing. And yet it's all I've ever known was Spanish-speaking Jews. I just never knew. And I really encourage, because a lot of us who have grown up in the mainland, I've said this a few times, I'm going to repeat it again. If you can get back to Puerto Rico, it is key to speak to those people who have been there forever, because they have stories to tell you, and it is worthwhile for you to go over there and to listen with an open mind, non-judgmental, give them a safe place to talk about their stories. There's a lot of shame that's been put on them over the years, a lot of pressure to keep this secret. And for a lot of them, they may be at a point where they want to speak about this now, especially towards the end of their life, they want to speak about these things. And I think it's important for you to collect those stories. I think it's important for you to give these stories over to your children. We cannot continue on with just this ignorance of our own history and allowing other people to come in and dictate our history or tell us, through books. I remember you gave me I'm not going to say the name of the book, but it was a fascinating statement where it was a fictional book, and they were saying, why is this happening to me? And it was a Converso family. Why is this happening to me? I was such a good Christian. And you and I both know that's not the statement they would be saying. They'd be saying, why is this happening? I was such a good Jew. You know what I mean? So, and this is what I mean, that we can't, look, I think it makes for a great story for some of these people, but that's not the accurate story. And I think sometimes like Hollywood movies, we take these, recreations and take it as fact. That's not the fact of what happened in Puerto Rico. And I think that my goal is always changing, I think, in a way. And I think even you've seen it. And even the more that I find out about my own family, I don't know if you remember, I remember you asked me the $1 million question. What do you do? Like, do you want to know? How far do you want to take this? Like, what if you find out if like Manso was in, and at the time I didn't know that Manso was in my tree. And the truth is that, and I said it then, it doesn't matter, right? Like, we have to help these people. And a part of me, Manso led to even a bigger discovery, back to Isabella. And now she's like twice in my life. And my purpose to bring this out is, it's not just about telling my story, it's about telling the truth, to let these people get the information to make a decision. But they have to know that this happened, that this really happened, that there are Jews that fled. They can be for sure in your family. And if you have ever had the question of who am I, and I mean that deep soul question, this may be the root of why you're asking yourself that question. And so I feel compelled not to hide the fact that even these Reshaim were in my family, and to encourage anyone that if these Reshaim, listen, if you can get past Isabella, Manso, like if you can get past them in your tree, you're good, right? Like you just keep going, you're good. Like, but I think along the way, you're gonna find so much to be proud of, so much to be happy of. But to always know, I think my biggest takeaway, and even going through my own genealogy, was the fact that this was a very intertwined, very intricate and complicated issue, what was happening with them. And I think for me, my takeaway has been that I have to choose to keep my eyes on Hashem every day, and to take each thing that comes up in my life as it comes, and to keep leaning on Hashem. Your Judaism can be stripped from you, it can be stolen from you, and Chas v'shalom, you could give it away. And I think that that's what I found in my tree, that all of the above happened. There were Jews that it was stolen from. There were Jews that lost it somehow, and there were Jews that gave it away. But that's the reality. And I think that the sooner I came to grips with that reality, I felt like I was such an open vessel now to not only receive the information, but to give it back out to all of those who are still on the journey, the beginnings of this journey, to help, like you, piece these puzzles together to find out what is the truth behind their escape. So yeah, you know I have to have you back because I ran out.
So much I want to say.
You're gonna have to come back, and then we're gonna have to get, and the next one, we're gonna have to get right into, like, you know, getting into those trees, how do you go about it, and some of the family member. I mean, Puerto Rico is a hotbed. It's a hotbed. That's all I can describe it.
As you were saying about the different decisions that people made, you know, as we're getting towards the end, I'll just share that I had recently, it was not long ago, that I found a document for a Maldonado in 1493, and it was an official document from the king and queen. I'm
actually gonna put this up because I remember this. I remember you and I were talking about this. Was like the people's court.
So I don't have direct documentation to say that I descend from this Rodrigo Maldonado, but it does explain that him and his wife and his children went to Portugal. They sold their property before they left, and they converted in Portugal and returned to Spain and regained their property. They were re-granted their property by the king and queen. They had to give the money back, obviously.
And this was actually a real people's court kind of thing, because there was a claim from the new owner who had taken the property that they had made some renovations to the house, right, and the king said, "We'll give you the house, but you have to pay back the renovations." Right. So it's funny because there's all these other nuances that were going on during this time of the Inquisition that it's really fascinating.
You just can never know what each person was going through and why they made the decision that they made, and we can't judge them for making that decision.
Exactly.
There isn't anything more horrifying than being subjected to people being burned alive and other, like, crowds of people celebrating it. I mean, I could be bombed, you know, by Hamas right now, and that would be nothing compared to being burned alive in front of a crowd of people cheering.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think you are spot on in that. You know, I think, and which is why the work that you do is so important, because it remembers the names.
Right.
It remembers the names of these people.
It's all we have of their neshama. You know?
And that's exactly it. And I think that it is so important. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I can't imagine it. I can't imagine. And I think what you hit on it, that the people are cheering it on.
I do have this feeling when I'm researching at times when I'm really on on a trail and I'm finding things, and it's like, when your mojo is just like really so I feel like they're up there and they're like, yes.
And my Rav has said the same thing. My Rav has said, you made it to my office because your ancestors are shaking the throne room of Shemaim saying, we want justice, we want justice. And I think that's what a lot of us are feeling, though I think many of us may not have been able to articulate that we're feeling this influx of energy from somewhere that says, this is not who you are. You have a whole past behind you, and they're waiting for you to discover it. And I think that the way to do that is you go into the rabbit hole and you see how far down it goes. But unfortunately, I think we've hit the end of the rabbit hole for this session. But please, if you have enjoyed this episode, please make a comment below. Send me an email at thelastanusa@gmail. It's the story of Puerto Rico. I've said it. I've been saying it. It has not been told. It's not been told fully because we're still discovering it. But I think that it's important that it is told, not because we're something special above everyone else, but because there is real information about what happened. I mean, again, I'll repeat, we brought up, Sevilla. Sevilla had 4,000, 3,000 of them gone. Can you imagine my shock when their Rav is telling me that everyone here is from Sevilla? And I'm like, how many of those, 25% that were left, how many of them came to Puerto Rico? How many of them have stories to tell? And I think it is important what happened to these people. It's almost like finding the city of Atlantis. What's happened to these people? But I think that the other parts of the Caribe, there are things that they can learn about what we've uncovered, but the way to do that is to get that information, to get it out. So please, show some love to my prima Yael, because we have to have her back. Please beg for her to come back. I mean, and I thank you so much because, again, I'm going to repeat to everyone, Hamas is in the middle of going crazy over there, and Baruch Hashem that you've come on at such a time. You've given so much of yourself during this time to share with us and to encourage people to go in and find their family. Which, I think I hope that my Abba is very proud when he said, find your family, but also that I can be even if it's a little part of helping other people find their family. I know my dad's got to be proud of you because he's just like, she's doing it for everyone, so please, again, send me, write me an email, and if you want me to get it to Yael, thelastanusa@gmail.com. I'd be happy to pass that along. Please send me your stories. We are looking to tell more stories of Puerto Rico and of other places. If you have it, I'm more than happy to share these stories. Puerto Rico is my little pied de terre that Hashem is giving me to go and conquer and discover. And so I'm happy to do it. But that's it for today, and I hope we'll all be together again soon. Bezrat Hashem. And this is my little. So I pray that you will all be back with us again, and I hope you enjoyed this edition of Arroz con Devorah. Thank you.
You can follow this series, Arroz con Devorah, on YouTube at Gimel Dalet 777. Click subscribe to be notified of upcoming sharing. You can find out more about my journey and how it all unfolded, and whether this is you too, by buying my book, The Last Anusa, available now on Amazon.